Hi everybody, I'm Gavin Glakas. Thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited to be here. I've been a professional artist for 20 years and I paint landscapes and cityscapes and portraits. I paint plein air, I paint in the studio. Today we're going to be talking about how to paint blazing sunshine, how to be painting something, in this case an Italian hilltop town where I go paint in Tuscany every summer, where you're just looking into late afternoon sunshine and the sun is illuminating everything. It's an effect called aerial perspective, where even though the object that we're painting is in shadow, we're looking into the sun. The sun is illuminating all of the atmosphere, all of the air and the moisture and the dust in front of the town. And it's creating an effect that really feels warm and vibrant and almost makes you squint when you look into it if you do it right. We'll talk about how to push color, how to control warm and cool, how to control paint, so that you get it to go where you want it to go. You get your edges, you get your thickness, your thinness, all for maximum emphasis. And we'll talk above everything about how to control the feel of your painting. The feel of your painting, it may be warm, it may be cool, it may be optimistic, it may be dark. But we'll talk about the tangible things that you can do with color and with paint quality to control the feel of your painting. So let's take a look at some of the materials we're going to be using today. Okay, everybody, let's take a look at our tools and materials that we'll be using for this painting. Here's my palette. I've got the color laid out around the edges like the color wheel. This is really, really important. I have a lot of students, many of whom are absolutely brilliant, but who lay their palettes out in a really disorganized fashion. You want your color laid out like the color wheel. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. The way that mine goes, in theory, the next stop from my very bluish reds, I'll tell you the colors in a second, is my reddish blue, my purple right here. So my next stop on my color wheel from here is here, and then I personally keep my blacks and browns and whites, and if I have grays and anything left over from my palette yesterday in this corner over here, it just makes sense to me. But it's important that, for instance, if you're painting with greens, you're painting sunshine, and those greens are getting lighter, you move towards yellow or orange. If they're getting darker, you move towards blue, and then it's laid out in order on purpose. So I have permanent rose, alizarin crimson, cadmium red light, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow light, yellow ochre. This is a color called chromium green oxide, which I like a lot for painting natural greens. It's more natural than a lot of the greens that come out of tubes. This is phthalo green, a very unnatural green. This is a color called phthalo turquoise, but it's very similar to cerulean blue. I've used colors called turquoise, just something in this neighborhood I find very helpful. Ultramarine blue, it's a redder blue. This is a purpler blue. This is a greener blue. So this needs to be closer to green. Dioxazine purple. This is Mars black. I like black. I use a lot of black. It comes in very handy when you're trying to take a color and make it darker and desaturate it. So whatever color you add black to, black is going to kill the color. And if you don't want that, don't add black. But if you do, use it. Venetian red, this is a color I use a lot, and titanium white. As for brushes, the brushes are really important. They really help you just control the paint, and I highly suggest that you use good brushes. I'm going to be using filberts. This is a big one. This is a smaller one. I'll be using flats. I love these synthetic flat brushes. They've got these razor sharp edges. This is a bigger one. This is a smaller one. They can be surgically precise or big and explosive. They're great brushes, and if you take care of them, they'll last forever. And I went out and bought myself a really tiny little brush because I'm going to be painting some really tiny details in this painting. And it's nice to have one of these and keep it in great shape. I'll be painting on hardboard. It's commonly known as masonite. My favorite texture to paint on is this. This is the hardboard that you get at the hardware store. And if you don't have a saw, they can cut it for you. But I put 3 coats of gesso on the front and on the back, and on the top coat I'll put in a little bit of acrylic paint, so I'm not painting into white. If you paint into a white canvas, everything looks too dark. But the feel of the paint going on here, my control on this, this is my favorite substance to paint on. And it's also nice because it's durable. I go and paint in Italy, and it's easy. Just throw a few of these in a suitcase and then let the painting dry, and then put them back in the suitcase. You don't need to deal with rolled up canvases or stretch canvases. They look great in frames. So those are the materials I'm going to be using. Let's get started. Okay, everybody. So let's talk about how I'm going to paint this painting. This is a painting that I did a few years ago. It's a plein air painting I did in the town in Tuscany where I take a workshop every summer. And I stood out here for a couple afternoons, and I did this, so I'm very familiar with everything, the depth and the color and the location that I'm going to paint. But I've always wanted to do a painting that really showed how high up in the mountains you are. These mountains are really steep. Even in a car, it's tough to get to these little hilltop towns. And I want to show a painting that really communicates that. So I started with this as my basic idea, and I said, well, how can I show, you know, the height of the mountains and the sort of almost otherworldly, closed-off nature of these towns, how private they are, how far removed you are from at least my everyday life. So I played with some sketches for a little bit, and this is the composition that I came up with that I like a lot. You know, if I want to show the height of the mountains, maybe a vertical image will help more than a horizontal one. If I want the town to look like it's really high up, maybe a little closer to the top of the canvas than the bottom. Now, the photograph, fortunately, I have a photograph of this, but I really, you know, I don't need this that much. I have most of the information that I need in the plein air painting that I already did, and I have the color relationships, not just the color, but the color relationships, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. And I have a sense of sort of the star of the show, of the artistic elements that we're dealing with. Subject matter doesn't really count as an artistic element. You know, I like history and I like architecture and I like all sorts of things. And perhaps you like flowers or you like people or whatever it is. The subject matter is sort of up to each of us as artists, but the artistic elements will be the same. And the artistic element that is kind of the driving force of this painting that got me so interested in it in the first place is aerial perspective. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But I have my photograph, and what I'm planning to do for this painting is not just repaint this on a different size canvas. I'm going to exaggerate all of these colors and all of the color relationships, because what I'm really going after is this aerial perspective. Aerial perspective is the name we've given to the phenomenon of creating atmosphere and creating depth in a painting by showing that there's more atmosphere, there's more air, there's more moisture, there's more dust in between us and the farthest elements in the painting, in between us and this mountain, than there is between us and this mountain and this mountain. And that basically we can see things clearer when they're closer to us. And as an extension of that, the colors are more vibrant, they're more saturated as they get closer. And most importantly, the shadows get darker as they get closer. If you can just remember that one when you're painting landscapes. The shadows get darker as they get closer. A lot of times in photographs, the shadows in the distance are black and the shadows in the foreground are black. And if you paint them all black, your painting will look really flat. But if you say to yourself, okay, these shadows are getting darker as they're getting closer, then you'll create a painting that's convincing with depth. So I'm going to be exploring the aerial perspective of this, but there's one added element. Most of the time when you're painting landscapes, as objects get farther away, and I say landscapes because you can see so much farther than in a still life. In a still life, the farthest thing away in your painting might be 10 feet away, but in a landscape, it might be, you know, miles and miles away. Most of the time when you're painting, objects get bluer as they recede. because blue light travels the farthest. It's visible to the human eye from farther away. However, if you're looking into a light source, so we're looking into the sun. At night, you might be looking into a purple light or a green light or an orange light. If you're looking into a light source, and we're looking into the sun's on the other side of these trees, but the sun's pretty powerful. If you're looking into a light source, then that light source is illuminating all of those, atmospheric particles in front of us in these mountains. And everything will take on the color of the light source as it gets farther back and as it gets closer to the light source. So I find it really helpful to do a color study if I'm not working from life. If I'm working from life, the color's just there. And after you've had some experience, not only can you find colors that work, I don't want to say match the color, because there's really no such thing. We're dealing with pigments, ground up with linseed oil. We're talking about depicting light or leaves or whatever the substance may be. It's not the same thing. So take the pressure off of yourself. You can't match the color. You can find a color that works. But when you're painting from life, we find a color that works and put it down. If you have had some experience, that's pretty easy. And then the fun part becomes how you can depart from that and how you can push and pull those colors. Painting in the studio doesn't work that way. You have to engineer all of those color relationships. Even if you have a fabulous photo, the photo it can't possibly match all the information that the human eye can take in. And the subtleties, the varieties of the color that you see in a flat brown wall, it just doesn't compare on any level when we're talking about working from life and working from a photo. So here's an interesting experiment. Go outside and paint for a couple hours. And when you're finished, take a photo of the thing that you're painting, the thing that you're depicting, and go into your studio and keep working on the painting, and you'll be floored by how little color you see in the photograph. It just doesn't compare to what our eye can take in from real life, and the subtleties of warms and cools that we see in just a brown wall, let alone a really vibrant scene. So when I'm doing a studio landscape or cityscape, often I'll do a color study first. And this is the color study that I did for the demo I'm about to paint. And this is my big experiment. Now, I always want my pursuit of color to be an experiment. Always, always, always. Color is just an experiment. That takes all the pressure off of you to try to, quote unquote, get the color right. There's no such thing. Whenever we're dealing with color, it's an experiment. And that's what this is. So often I'll do a little color study first and sort of just try all sorts of different things and see where my painting is going to go, so that when I do the finished painting, I can paint it with authority. Now, a lot of times I don't do that. A lot of times I want my experiment and all of my mistakes to be part of the finished painting, so that there can be that feeling of spontaneity and of exploration. And that my process of painting, even in the studio, can be part of the painting, rather than the painting just being sort of a finished entity of itself. But a lot of times, especially if I'm really going to experiment, it's helpful to do a color study first. So this is the color study that I did first. And remember, the main point of this painting, I always think of a painting as having a point. The main point of the painting is the atmospheric perspective. We also call it aerial perspective. And so what I'm telling myself and the viewer is that because I'm looking into the sun, because this yellow-orange sun is illuminating all of the atmosphere, even though it's not striking most of my painting, because a lot of this painting is shadow, because the sun's on the other side of the painting, it is striking the air and the dust and the moisture in front of all of these objects. So as the sets on my stage, that's how I think of landscapes. I think of these as sets on the stage, right? As they recede, these bushes, this mountain, this mountain, this mountain, this mountain, sky. As they get farther away, they're going to take on the color of the light source, which is yellowish orange, and the darks will get lighter. Okay, the shadows will get lighter, and the shadows will get more orange because they're taking on the color of the light source. So So that's something that can be really intriguing in your paintings, is an exploration of aerial perspective. Whether it's a daytime scene and our light source is the sun, or it's a nighttime scene, and we're painting all these great colors that we find at night. I mean, there are blue lights, there are purple lights, there are green lights. And I tell you what, if you're painting a cityscape and the light is blue, maybe it'd be more interesting if it were green. Maybe it'd be more interesting if it were orange. You're the artist. You get to decide. You're not held captive by whatever color light bulb the person who owns the bar put in that light when you happen to take the picture. Change those colors around. If you understand the properties of aerial perspective and color, which I'm going to talk about in a second, then you're free. You're free to just experiment. You're free to be creative. You're free to make decisions. You're free to take this photograph that you have and make it your own. There's no photograph on earth that can't be improved upon. And it's the improving upon it and the making decisions and the trying things out that I find so exciting when I'm in my studio. I love painting plein air because it's just such a wonderful experience. But I love the freedom of painting in my studio because I'm held captive by nothing. There's nothing that I can't do. And so understanding this aerial perspective really, really helps. And part of what I'm going to be doing is really experimenting with color in order not just to capture aerial perspective, that phenomenon, but to really exaggerate it and to make it my own. Okay, so let's talk about color for a second. I'm going to suggest to you that a lot of your color problems can be solved if you think about color in terms of the color wheel, first of all, not in terms of all those tubes of paint that they sell at the art supply store, but in terms of the color wheel. And not just, there's all sorts of different color wheels, but that if you just say to yourself, there are really only 6 colors, okay? And if everything that I'm ever trying to paint, if I can figure out which of those 6 colors it is, this will make it a lot easier for me. So let me explain. There are 3 questions you want to ask yourself about color. And if, when you're looking at something and you're trying to figure out what color might work, when you're on your palette and you're mixing colors, you're trying to figure out what colors to use, when you're examining your painting and asking yourself what's wrong with it, because there's always something wrong with it. If you go through the progression of these 3 questions, this will really get you there. So question number 1 is just simply, what color is it? Where on your color wheel is it? We all know that the stop sign's red and that the sky's blue, but those browns, those beiges, those grays, those hard to find colors, which direction are they going in? If you're painting brown, is it a purplish brown? Is it a yellowish brown? Is it a reddish brown? When you're painting grays, if you're outside painting clouds, what direction are those clouds going in? So the location on the color wheel, that's question number 1. And once you confine your choices to just 6, okay, it's in one of these places. We painting people, human skin tones? Well, they're not over here. They must be over here. That makes it a whole lot easier. So question 1, location on the color wheel. Question 2, value. How light or how dark is the area in question? If you're painting a person, are they lighter than the chair behind them? Are they darker than the clouds outside the window? Question 1 is location on the color wheel. Question 2 is value. How light or how dark? Okay, question 3 is saturation. How pure is the color? How saturated is it? If you're painting trees, is it pure green or is it a little closer to brown or yellow or orange or red? Is it desaturated a little bit? If we're painting people, regardless of where the people's great-grandparents came from, of what ethnicity they are they a pure orange and red, or are they shifting a little bit towards a more browner version of reddish orange? You add enough white to get them the right value. You add enough of the complement to make sure that they're not electric red, electric orange, electric yellow people. And then you go through that progression again. So you say to yourself, okay, my person is an orangish, peachy color that's about here on the color wheel. But they're not electric orange, so I'll add a little bit of the complement, right? And now I'll add, we'll say we're painting me. My dad's Greek, my mom's Irish, my skin is this color. We're painting me. Okay, we'll add a little bit of blue so I'm not electric orange, but that's too dark. So we'll add a little bit of white. So my hand is lighter than this shirt, but it's darker than the sun that you see outside the window. Okay, so it's the right value. And then you go through that progression again and you say, location on the color wheel, is this color that I'm putting up here on my canvas, is it too yellow, too red, or just right? And here's the thing, it's never going to be just right, so don't worry about it. Give yourself the leeway to experiment and to make mistakes and fix them. The color that I put up on the canvas is never just right. You're going to see in the demo. I'm always tweaking it a little here, a little there. And if you tweak it as you're tweaking it, in relation to these three questions, you go, okay, I'm painting my skin tone. It needs to be a little redder, but the red makes it darker. So I'll add a little bit of white for the value. That makes it right. So location on the color wheel, value, how light or how dark, and saturation, how pure or how diluted is the color. If you go through those three questions, that'll get you there. So we're going to be painting a lot of trees today. We're painting green, but we're painting direct sunlight too. So as the trees get lighter, they're going to be going in this direction. As the trees get darker, they should be going in this direction. Most of the time you're outside, if the sun's shining, and green is, so you're painting green trees. As the trees get lighter, they're going in this direction. Then, by default, as they get darker, they're going in this direction, right? Wherever you are on the color wheel, you're painting somebody's purple shirt. As it gets lighter, it's either shifting towards red or it's shifting towards blue, depending on your light source. Which means that if it's shifting this way, if you're painting a purple shirt in cool light, so indirect light from a window, purple shirt, as it gets lighter, it's getting bluer. By default, that means that it's getting darker, it's getting redder. So we would anticipate our green trees getting lighter and yellower and darker and bluer in this painting, but because of the aerial perspective of we're looking into the sun, and the sun is basically making everything look more orange. It's illuminating all of the particles of atmosphere in between us and the shadows. The shadows are also going to be getting warmer as they recede and as they get closer geographically on my painting, as they get closer to the sun. So three questions: location on the color wheel, value, and saturation. And then, in terms of all of my experiments with color, which is all painting is, the whole notion of dealing with color in a painting is just a big experiment, include me putting up a color, whatever it may be, and then saying, as this local color shifts, so you're painting an orange basketball, you're painting green trees, I'm painting this town. As the color shifts, so the town is a grayish brownish color, it's in here. As these colors shift, which way are they going on the color wheel? I'm painting my green trees, right? Are they going this way or are they going this way? And if whatever the local color is, you can just, as that color gets lighter and darker, figure out if you're shifting and going clockwise or going counterclockwise, and thereby making a decision between two things rather than the millions of colors that our eye takes in or the 300 colors that they sell at the art supply store. If you're just making a decision between two things, you're either shifting left or you're shifting right. This gets not only easier and more doable, but a whole lot more fun. And now, if this seems daunting, if this seems like a lot of kind of intellectualizing, if this seems very methodical, first of all, I'll suggest to you that it's a whole lot easier than flailing away and just all of those really frustrating disasters that a painting can become before you finally smash the whole thing and throw it away. And I'll also tell you that this gets a lot easier and a lot faster the more you do it. So the more you practice and the more methodical you are when you practice, there's only three questions, and one of them, value, is super easy. The more methodical you are about this when you paint and when you practice, the quicker it's going to get, and the sooner you'll get to that day where it's like typing. I don't think about the letters anymore. I think about words, and my fingers just magically do it. And that's the way color becomes. is that you'll get to the point where the mixing of the color is just easy and you don't even think about it. And it's all of the creative concepts that are really occupying your brain and that are really challenging and that are really intriguing. And that's why we paint in the first place, is because of the creativity and the magic of all these decisions that we're trying to make. So the more methodical about this you are, the easier it's going to get. So those are all the things that I'm thinking about as I'm planning out this painting. And now let's get to it. All right, so let's get started with the painting. So first of all, I'm going to just paint an entire tone of orange paint. Sometimes I'll sort of come up with a color that I want to set the tone for the entire painting. And I'll paint the whole painting into that tone of wet paint. So it can not only slightly blend in with all of the color, but also peek through in all of the in-betweens. And so that as I'm choosing all the colors for this painting, I can calibrate them in relation to that tone. So when I'm in Italy and I'm looking at a scene like this and the sun is shining and it's hot and it's beautiful, it just feels very orange. So I'm going to put up a tone of orange and paint everything into that. If you've never worked this way before, try it. It's really liberating. It's hard if you don't have a lot of experience. It's not easy. It's not easy to paint into a tone of wet paint, but you'll learn a lot. And this is something that I do all the time in landscapes and in portraits and in everything, is that I'll put a tone down of something, sometimes a warm color and I'll paint warm colors into it, sometimes a warm color and I'll paint cool colors into it, sometimes vice versa. If I'm painting somebody's cheek in a portrait, maybe I'll put down a tone of green, especially if it's a guy, and then paint the pinks and peaches into that. It's just an effective approach to immediately not only adding some variety and sort of setting both the physical and the psychological tone of the painting, but you also get some great effects, and it really helps you with the color. It's going to be easier to mix the greens and the oranges and the yellows and the grays for this painting if I'm comparing them to this orange than if I'm comparing them to this gray. Now, why didn't I just tone this thing orange to begin with? Because I want to paint into wet paint, not dry paint. So let's try this color out. We'll see if it's red enough. So when you're painting orange, it's either going to be too red or too yellow or just right. Incidentally, I'll be using a little bit of odorless mineral spirits with this just to thin this down a little bit and get it on there with as little paint as possible. When you're painting into a layer of paint, you want as little paint underneath what you will ultimately paint as possible. You don't want big gloppy Van Gogh brushstrokes under there. Yeah, this is good. It's a little wet. It's a little wet. Let me. Well, so this will be dry fairly soon, given how much mineral spirits are in here. So maybe I'll add a little more paint that's slightly drier. Okay, so now I'm going to start blocking in the color. I'm going to work from back to front in order to build space and also in order to create the light and gauge every color based on the light source. So every local color, all of the greens, the grays and beiges and oranges of the town, are going to be, as they get farther away and as they get lighter, are going to be shifting towards the color of the light source, which is a yellowish orange. We're looking into the sun. Now, you can't actually see the sun because it's on the other side of the trees, but I'm exaggerating the glow of the sun, just lighting up the entire sky and the aerial perspective of the sunlight lighting up the atmosphere in between me and the mountains. So I'm going to start back here, and I think of landscapes, really everything, as sets on a stage. So here's the curtain in the back. This is the sky. And then this mountain is the next set. And then maybe there's a mountain in front of that. And then this mountain is the next set. This is closer than this. And then this is in front of that. And then these trees will be in front of this. So I'm just going to work from background to foreground. One, so I can set the tone for the color, and two, so I can overlap. Because by controlling the values, by making sure that all of the shadows get lighter as they recede, and making sure that all the colors move closer to, in this case, the color of the light source. But also by overlapping, I'll be able to create depth, and I'll be able to get the foreground to look like it's closer and the background to look like it's farther away. So, to begin with, I'm going to be starting with some very light, I'll just take a very light orange. And good, this is what I want. I'll block the sky in with this. Now, the sun is on the other side of these trees. So everything as it moves towards here, as everything geographically moves up in this neighborhood, is going to be getting lighter and yellower. So even this sky, when I block this in, as it moves this way, is going to be getting lighter and yellower. I'm going to try and keep this edge there. Another reason why you paint from back to front is part of the overlapping thing, but you just don't want to paint around something that you've already painted well. You don't want to paint scared. You want to paint confidently. One, the painting will be better, and two, it's a lot more fun. This is allowed to be fun. We're allowed to have fun doing this. Okay, now I'm going to have the glow of the sky back here. I'm going to lose this edge here. I'm going to have it fade into this mountain. But most of that we'll deal with a little bit later. And by a little bit, I mean in like a couple minutes. Okay. Okay. Now, let's punch this up a little bit. Remember, it's going to be getting lighter and yellower as it heads that way. So I'm going to add white, and I'm taking this color around the color wheel in this direction. You know, I'm about here on the color wheel. I'm not heading that way. I'm heading that way. And this is a theme that I'll return to over and over again because it's the way that I encourage you to look at color in terms of the color wheel, and just if you make your decisions between wherever you are, going either clockwise or counterclockwise, as opposed to the 58 tubes of paint that you have in your paint box, and trying to decide which one's which, this gets a lot easier. So let's take some white. We'll take some yellow. Let's really power that up. This is a place where I can paint really thickly. You know, I want this to be noticeable, and I just want it to really sing. Maybe I'll take my really soft brush, knock down a couple of these edges. You know, these type of decisions are completely up to you. You can smooth this out and make it perfect. You can leave all the action. You can do whatever you want. I'm going to knock it down a little bit. Some of these strokes are a little distracting for me, and I like this. Okay. Tell you what, let me just pull this down a little more. I'll reserve the right to punch this up even more later. I have a little space between here and here. You know, maybe I'll punch it up a little more later, and maybe I won't. We'll see. So now I'm going to get into the mountain. So I'm pushing this mountain really far back. What this mountain is, the shadow of the, so I'm going to be blocking in the shadows of everything. This set, this set, this set, and then putting the lights on top. Because it's easier for me to judge it that way. We all have our little idiosyncrasies. And it's easier for me to judge it that way. And what I'm looking for here is a color that is darker than this and greener than this. So the farther back I want that mountain, the closer to this color it's going to be. At a certain point, you know, if I were up and, I mean, at a certain point, the farther away this gets, it just fades into the sky. So the darker this is in relation to the sky, the closer it will be to us. So I'm going to push it back pretty far, and let's see, maybe I'll use one of these sharp brushes. I'm going to push it back pretty far, so I just need a color that's a little darker and greener than this. I might not even go all the way to green. Yellow ochre is greener than yellow. Let's see what we can do with these two colors and some white. Now, most of the time that I mix colors, I'm mixing a color by comparing it with another color. So I'm mixing it compared to this. So usually I'll just take this, mix in a tiny bit of green, get a little bit of that, and then remix a big pile of that color. But I don't have that much of this, so I'm just mixing a new color that's going to be slightly darker and slightly greener than this. Maybe I will take a tiny bit of green, and because this is getting a little white all of a sudden, a little washed out, a little green and a little orange. Okay. So it's a little darker and a little greener. Might be too dark. I might want that a little lighter, but we'll see. How does this look against this? I do a lot of getting back from the canvas to judge. That looks pretty good. I can live with this. By the way, you know, when we talk about green mountains, look at this color next to green. Look at this color next to that color. So let's graduate that, the glow of that light a little farther back. Now, the block-in stage of a painting is just a big experiment. You're just trying to figure out what colors work here, what colors don't. What do I like? How far do I want to push that back? How warm do I want the sunlight? How warm do I want the green? So try things out and see what works and what doesn't. All right, I'm going to take this. Now that's getting a little, I might need a new brush for that. I'm going to make more of this very light yellow color so that I can just create a bit more of that graduation. It stops a bit abruptly right there. So let's see how that goes. a lot of my students tell me that they have trouble mixing the same color twice, and that just comes with experience. Just mix lots of colors and do it over and over and over again, and you'll get there. And do it right. Don't mess around. Just sit there and go, okay, I need more yellow. And just do it, and then put the color down on the color you're trying to mix. And if you don't get it right, ask yourself the 3 color questions. Location on the color wheel. What is the hue? Value. Does it need to be lighter or darker? And saturation. How saturated do I want it to be? Now this color is, so I'm mixing this color. This color is a little too light and a little too yellow. On the color wheel, in terms of the 3 questions, it needs to move this way. In terms of value, it needs to get a little bit darker. And it's really purely saturated. It's just one color in white. And I'm going to basically keep it purely saturated. I'm not going to mix in any of the complements or any cool colors into this. And so that was too much orange. Okay, so now I need to scoot it back that way and probably add more white. And this is just what you have to do. A little more white, and then we're there. Okay. That's fine. All right. Okay, that'll work for now. Now, remember, as this mountain gets farther away from the sun, it gets greener. So I'm going to add a slightly greener color up there. Now this one will be easy. So now I just take this color and add a little green to it. We'll see what happens. I might add a little black to knock the color down a little bit. We'll see. Oh, this looks like it should be okay. This shouldn't be a total disaster. Let's see here. Yeah, good. Okay. Now I'm going to put the texture of the mountain into this a little later. But for now, meaning the lights and the plains and the crags of those rocks and everything. But for now, this is fine now. Okay. Okay, so this mountain is going to be darker and greener than this. Now, if I want to make this look like it's much closer to than this, I'll make it even darker and greener. The darker, the less orange, the more of its local color, which is green, the closer it will be. So this is one of those situations where I'm going to take some of this, I'm going to add some of this, I'll get the right color. And then I'll place it on here. So I have a color study that I did where I took the colors from my plein air painting and pushed them and exaggerated them and just experimented with them. All right, so now I'll mix more of this color. Okay. It's ever so slightly darker and yellower. That's fine. Remember, I'm going to be painting into most of this, so I don't want a ton of paint on here. This is already layer number 2, so it's going to be a little more difficult to control layer number 3 when I place the texture and the planes of light on top of these mountains. So I kind of want to apply as little paint here as possible. By the way, this looks really dark, doesn't it? Is it too dark and too green? Well, look on my palette. Look at this color compared to that color. It's not that dark. Let's look at it compared to black. It's not that dark. It's really not that green. So I think I'm okay here. Now that we're getting close to there, maybe I will warm and lighten this up and then darken and cool this. Let's see. Especially because on this mountain, this is closer to us than that. So let's see what we can do here. I'll actually just take this color, because this is lighter and warmer than that. I need more of it anyway. I'll mix some of that, and I'll use that to create just a bit of a suggestion of the last remnants of the glow of the sunlight in here. So mixing color, this can take a while, and especially in the opening stages of your painting. If you're blocking a painting in, I might spend a lot more time mixing color than actually painting. There are times where you know, for a certain painting, more of the time for the entire painting will have been spent mixing color than applying paint. There's certainly times where I'll go back into a painting to fix something, and I'll have to spend 45 minutes mixing colors and 3 minutes touching up the painting. So this is part of it, and it's a part where you really can learn a lot. I mean, when you are on your own mixing your colors, take that as an opportunity to learn a lot about colors. Location on the color wheel, value, and saturation. Learn as much as you can about that. Okay, so I need that in there. That's close enough. A little white. Okay. Slightly warmer, but that's all right. It's a warm painting. Let me just scrape off any excess here. Okay. There's not a lot of paint on there, but there's a little more than I'd like to have in some of these places, because I'm planning to paint more on there later. Okay, so here we go. I'll keep that edge. You know, I won't smoke it out like there, but I'll just create a bit more sunlight, a bit more depth. Well, maybe I will lose that edge a little bit. How's that look? Does that look all right? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I've got my kind of base green color here. I'll go a little darker down here where we're getting a little closer to us. I'm going to add a little green and a little black. Black is actually a very handy color when you're painting green. If you mix black and yellow, you'll get a much more natural green than most of the greens that come out of tubes. Most of the greens that come out of tubes. So painting greens from nature is tough because you're outside and the sun's shining and the green looks so vibrant. You know, and you take your green paint, whatever color it is, and you go, okay, I'm going to use this. I'm not going to mix any red in there. And I'm going to mix some yellow and some white, and it looks really vibrant. And you put it up, and it's really vibrant, but it just doesn't ring true as a natural color. I'm sure everybody's had this problem. I know I have. It looks like a neon sign at a miniature golf course. It just doesn't ring true like leaves and foliage. I find that most of the greens that I see people using out of the tube are cooler than the greens you see in nature, even on overcast days. So, you know, don't go too saturated in those greens if you want it to feel natural. Hi, I'm Gavin Glakas. Welcome to my workshop. In this workshop, we're going to be painting direct sunlight and looking directly into the sun and talking about how to create those effects of aerial perspective, of depth, of blazing warm sunlight that just pervades everything in your painting. And we'll talk a lot about how to control color. Not just how to pursue it and how to try to find the color and mix something that works, but how to take color and just use it for your own ends and explore it and experiment and push it and pull it, and how to use color to really create atmosphere. I think one thing that's really holding students back is really just understanding color, understanding how to take it and use it for your own ends. And I'm going to lay out some really simple questions to ask yourself, which will hopefully get you past the point of just chasing color and trying to find the right color, and get you to the point where color becomes a toy for you to play with, that you can just use and push and pull for whatever ends you're trying to achieve. I think another thing that's really holding students back is a hesitancy to break away from the photograph. So we're going to talk about ways to just use the photograph for your own creative ends and how to make decisions about what to include and what not to include, rather than just trying to reproduce something that may or may not have a lot of artistic merit in its own right. So one of the first decisions I make whenever I'm setting out to paint something is, what's the feel that I want? What's the mood? I don't start with subject matter. I start with that feel. Sometimes I want dark and dangerous. Sometimes I want glorious and optimistic. And in this one, we're going to be painting direct sunlight. I want to really explore how warm, how optimistic, how positive it can feel. We're going to talk about all of the steps we can take, the tangible steps we can take to really infuse the painting with warmth, both in terms of color and in terms of emotion. I think that anybody who's encountered all the problems that I've encountered in learning how to paint would be the perfect fit for this workshop. Anybody who's ever had trouble with color, anybody who's had trouble with depth, anybody who's had trouble trying to get their painting to really exude the feeling that they have. We say to ourselves, I want my painting to feel like this. I want it to really communicate this, and then we don't quite get there. I'm going to talk about all of the tangible steps we can take to get our paintings to have mood, to really, really communicate a feel. And I'm going to be talking about how to break away from the photograph and to use the photograph just as the first step on a much longer, much more creative, much more exciting journey. If I want to turn people loose and help them really execute their ideas. So join me on this adventure and we'll get into how to deal with sunlight and color and depth and atmosphere. I'm Gavin Glakas. I've been a professional artist for 20 years. I paint portraits and landscapes and cityscapes. I started drawing when I was a little kid. I started painting in high school. And I love going back and forth between portraits and cityscapes because often I'll be trying to capture the same feeling, just with completely different subject matter and completely different artistic elements like light and color and composition. Growing up, I loved to draw, and my parents really encouraged me. So I was always drawing in restaurants and on trips and just hanging around the house. I had a great high school art teacher and a really ambitious art program in high school. I was planning on becoming a professional artist. But I met enough people. My parents and my teacher really encouraged me, but nobody else did. And I met enough people, enough professional artists over the years who just told me that you can't do it. You can't make any money. You can't have a career. So going to college, I decided that I wouldn't go to art school. I just went to a regular university. I was planning to be a lawyer. I regretted that decision immediately and immediately felt like a coward. I felt like somebody who just didn't have the courage to pursue the one thing they wanted to pursue in the world. I got into a painting program in London my second semester junior year, and it was like I was drowning, and then I reached the surface and I was able to breathe again. I was painting, I was going to museums, and that's where I really decided that I wanted to be a professional artist. I was working in an office a few years after college. I made the decision to become a professional artist, to change the course that my life was on. I went and told my parents and sat down with them. Within a month of telling my parents that I planned to change direction in my life, I got really sick. And I spent the next 6 or 8 months in and out of the hospital and having surgery and then recuperating and going back to work and then having surgery again. And I made a full recovery. And I was able to have a lifetime epiphany, a life or death epiphany, and get out of it 100% healthy. It was really a miracle. And that's what really gave me the courage to pursue art full time. I got a job working in an art gallery. I found 2 great art teachers and started studying with them. The gallery, within a year, started showing my work and selling it consistently and getting me commissions. I was able to paint 4 days a week, study 2 days a week, and build upon that. So I consider myself the luckiest person in the world that I'm able to take this thing that I absolutely love and do it for a living. I found that the love of art came naturally for me. The desire to be able to draw and to want to be able to draw and paint like all of my heroes, that came very naturally to me. The ability did not come naturally to me at all. And as soon as I realized that it wasn't supposed to come naturally to me and that it was a skill that I needed to learn, like a language or an instrument, it got a lot easier to deal with my failures and to try and build upon them. I think all of art is one big struggle in believing in your work. The problem with being an artist, at least for me and most of the artists I know, is that we're not comparing ourselves to the guy next to us in class. We're comparing ourselves to Michelangelo, and it's really easy not to believe in your work when you're comparing yourself to Michelangelo or Rembrandt or whoever your hero is. But I always just looked at it like a journey. I'm better today than I was yesterday. I'm going to be better tomorrow than I was today. You know, we all know that feeling of looking at paintings that we did, I don't know, 6 months, 2 years, 10 years ago that we thought were amazing at the time, that might have been breakthrough paintings, and looking at them now and going, oh my gosh, that's terrible. How did I think that was any good? But I love that feeling because that means that I've learned something since then. So yeah, lots of struggles believing in my work, but I just tried to see it as all part of a process, and I've tried to embrace the process. So the part of the process that might make me the happiest is I love the idea part of the process. I love coming up with an idea, playing with it, and letting it marinate for a while, you know, rolling it around in my head while I'm driving, falling asleep at night and just letting it just go and seeing where it'll end up, taking my sketchbook and working my way through thumbnails and just quick little sketches of where it could go. You know, maybe scouting around some of my favorite artists, heading down to the National Gallery, and how does Rembrandt handle those problems? You know, how does Veronese handle those problems? And then sitting down to say, okay, now's the time. Let's really do it. And taking an idea and executing and seeing it through is such a great feeling. When I had so many ideas when I was younger that never made it, you know, literally past the drawing board. I just love that, the idea and the really creative part of the process. So the great thing about art is that we're all individuals. We all have our own experiences. We all have our own interests. We all read different books last month. There's so many things that I'm interested in, and so many things I want to learn about, and so many things I want to read about. For me, art is the way that I explore all of those interests. It's the way that I learn about things. It's the way that I see the way people interact with each other, and the way that I look at the way people's minds work. I'm really fascinated with human interaction. I love history. I love what I call the continuity of traditions. You know, the way people have solved the same problems at different points in history. I love the tangible kind of manifestation of all of that. You can stand in a spot. It's where these incredible things happened over the last few thousand years. I love the abstract elements of composition and color. I love the mood and the emotional feel that I get from a painting, and that hopefully the viewer might get from one of my paintings. I love the problem solving of, how can we take these colors and mix them together? How can I take this thing and apply this to a surface and hit an emotional note on somebody? You know, how can I get my uncle, who loves watching sports and never goes to the National Gallery and never even thought about being an artist, how can I get him to stop in his tracks and go, wow, there's just something about that? You know, those are the things that interest me and that hopefully I bring to my work. I love painting landscapes and cityscapes because I really feel like I'm free to just take them and go anywhere with them. I can move things around. I can not include things. I can add other things in. What direction is the light coming from? Well, why don't I be in charge of that? What color is the light? I'll be in charge of that one too. Do we need something over here, or should it be over here? I think that they're a perfect vehicle for me to really create a feel and a mood and emotion and a sort of statement about the human experience that's encumbered by nothing. Do we want it to be vertical? Do we want it to be horizontal? Are we focused on something more psychological, or is it more abstract and visual? Why does this place matter to me? How subtle, how nebulous an idea can I have about why I think something's cool, why I think it's exciting, and how am I able to communicate that to the viewer? There are things that that I couldn't possibly explain in words, but that I can explain in paint. And when I see it connect with the viewer, it really turns me on. So that's why I love painting cityscapes and landscapes. That's why I'm so excited about them. Hi, I'm Gavin Glakas. Welcome to my workshop. In this workshop, we're going to be painting direct sunlight and looking directly into the sun and talking about how to create those effects of aerial perspective, of depth, of blazing warm sunlight that just pervades everything in your painting. And we'll talk a lot about how to control color, not just how to pursue it and how to try to find the color and mix something that works, but how to take color and just use it for your own ends and explore it and experiment and push it and pull it, and how to use color to really create atmosphere. I think one thing that's really holding students back is really just understanding color, understanding how to take it and use it for your own ends. And I'm going to lay out some really simple questions to ask yourself, which will hopefully get you past the point of just chasing color and trying to find the right color, and get you to the point where color becomes a toy for you to play with, that you can just use and push and pull for whatever ends you're trying to achieve. I think another thing that's really holding students back is a hesitancy to break away from the photograph. So we're going to talk about ways to just use the photograph for your own creative ends and how to make decisions about what to include and what not to include, rather than just trying to reproduce something that may or may not have a lot of artistic merit in its own right. So one of the first decisions I make whenever I'm setting out to paint something is, what's the feel that I want? What's the mood? I don't start with subject matter. I start with that feel. Sometimes I want dark and dangerous. Sometimes I want glorious and optimistic. And in this one, we're going to be painting direct sunlight. I want to really explore how warm, how optimistic, how positive it can feel. And we're going to talk about all of the steps we can take, the tangible steps we can take to really infuse the painting with warmth, both in terms of color and in terms of emotion. I think that anybody who's encountered all the problems that I've encountered in learning how to paint would be the perfect fit for this workshop. Anybody who's ever had trouble with color, anybody who's had trouble with depth, anybody who's had trouble trying to get their painting to really exude the feeling that they have. We say to ourselves, I want my painting to feel like this. I want it to really communicate this, and then we don't quite get there. I'm going to talk about all of the tangible steps we can take to get our paintings to have mood, to really, really communicate a feel. And I'm going to be talking about how to break away from the photograph and to use the photograph just as the first step on a much longer, much more creative, much more exciting journey, if I want to turn people loose and help them really execute their ideas. So join me on this adventure and we'll get into how to deal with sunlight and color and depth and atmosphere.